BYU is in their AJ Dybantsa era. Time to find out, though. Can they be elite?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shader, joining me at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Yes, even here in late July. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank you for joining us around the noon hour on the East Coast. Eat some lunch, hang out with me and Leaf. And reminder, you can catch every episode of our show ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all of you everydayers here with us and all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord, where we're hanging out talking college hoops all day, every day. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Coming up on the show today, joining me is our good buddy Leaf Tulane, and how appropriate today, because we're talking some BYU Cougars, and this man lives in the great state of Utah, and so it's highly appropriate. So we're going to talk about BYU really trying to establish themselves among the country's elite. Are they going to be that? This season we'll have a buy or sell segment. Also on Tuesday, what precipitated this conversation is that the Cougars released officially their non-conference schedule on Tuesday. So we'll unpack that, look at it. Is it worthy of their AJ Dybantsa year? And then we're going to wrap the show talking about Memphis. Good grief. It feels like there's always something happening with the fighting Penny Hardaways. So we'll talk about what's next. Was it the right decision for the Big 12 to tell them no, go home and stay in the American? We'll look at all that. Leaf, let's start with BYU, and I'll just ask it to you this way. Are you buying or selling BYU as a top 5 team in college basketball this season?
I'd go with sell, because top 5 is very hard to be. Like, it's not easy to be a top 5 team. Would I be stunned if they touched the top 5 in the rankings? No, but I think if you look at the preseason, I don't think they're quite top 5. And if you look at the actual season, I think there's a couple teams in the Big 12 that are better than them, and therefore, and only one of those I actually see as being a top 5 team. So I think it's difficult for them to at least consistently be there. There's a world in which they peak and they hit a top 5. I think they can be a 2 or a 3 seed. But top 5 is basically a 1 seed, and that makes it very difficult to be a top 5. So I think I'm going to go on the safer side of this. I do see a lot of potential, but their non-conference, which we'll get to, has some difficult games, so it's hard to build up the wins early to be a top 5. And I think the Big 12 is unforgiving enough where it's going to be difficult to win enough in the Big 12 to make themselves a top 5 team. So I think I'm going on the safe side of this, which is a little bit atypical. I tend to try to go with some bold predictions, but I'm going to say no on this one. I think it takes a little while to learn how to play with a new guy being a star. As a last year's team, Yegor Demon was a little more easy to play with in the sense of he's a distributor, and Richie Saunders could take the reins as the lead guy, as the scorer, and the most important player on the team. This year, I think there's going to be some growing pains. Rob Wright likes the ball in his hands. Richie obviously deserves the ball in his hands. AJ is going to have the ball frequently. And Kevin Young played an NBA style, so it's not as hard for him to incorporate. But I do think there's growing pains involved in that type of transition.
Leaf, what I like that you really did there is that it wasn't just about who BYU is going to be. In your answer, you also reminded us that it's got to also be about other top teams in the nation, right? Like, sometimes you're a phenomenal basketball team, but maybe there's 5 other teams that just knock you back to 6 or 7, right? Because I think if I asked you buy or sell BYU as a top 10 team, so instead of having to be a 1 seed or the top number 2 seed, you could be a 1, a 2, or one of the top 2, 3 seeds. And so, like, if I gave you top 10, would you buy that instead of selling?
Yeah, I think if you were to give me a season long, can they be top 10? I would say that they definitely will touch the top 10. I don't know if I would say I'm that confident they'll be a 1 or a 2 or a top 2, 3 seed. I'm not certain of that. I could absolutely see it, but I wouldn't tell you with like steadfast confidence that. I do think at some point in this season they'll be a top 10 team in the country, though, and that's how I viewed this, as opposed to like where they end up in the final poll, or where they are in the preseason. I think throughout the season, they'll touch the top 10. I'd be a little surprised if they're in the top 5, but it wouldn't stun me. And if they don't touch the top 10, that would shock me because they have a lot of talent. They may end up preseason top 10 for all I know. I mean, I think they probably have the talent to back that up. And then they have marquee games if they're to win one that certainly could perpetuate them up the rankings. So I think you're going to see a team that is a 2 or a 3 seed. I think it's difficult to be a 1, especially in the Big 12, because there's just a lot of losses that you can get in formidable, hostile environments on the road. You have to really perform admirably on the road to end up earning a top 5 spot in the AP poll in the Big 12, and I just don't see them doing that quite yet.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, Leaf, let me circle back then. I looked at the outside influences. Let's look back at the inside influences. You in particular, and I think very wisely so, talked about AJ Dybantsa, talked about Rob Wright, the fresh or now sophomore point guard coming over from Baylor, and about Richie Saunders, all of whom are quite used to, thank you very much, a high usage rate. And then you factor in, other players that will certainly be part of this team. I think we can talk about the top 5 or starting 5 in depth or whatever. But do you foresee it taking a while for those 3 guys to figure out how to gel? But I think probably my bigger question is, once they do figure that out, do you think that is a big 3 worthy of like, man, they could really be rolling if those 3 dudes can each settle into their role?
Yeah, and I think last year they had a moment in late February where it was, hey, we can actually defend a little better, and our offense is potent. We just need to be able to turn defense into offense a little bit and make the offense even better. And from late February onward, they were one of the better teams in the country. Like I would have told you pretty confidently, they're a top 12 team in the country for the final month and a half of the season. But the issue is it took a while to come together. I think that was partially because Kevin Young was new and they were installing new ideas. Yegor Din was new. He improved as the season went along. There was kind of conversation of who's going to play what position, what role. This year, I think the growth curve is going to be reliant on how much Rob Wright has the ball versus how much AJ has the ball, because Richie can play off the ball. And he doesn't need the ball to score. He needs the ball off of his curls, off of pin downs, off of back cuts. And that's really helpful that their best scorer, at least from last season, is someone who's comfortable away from the ball. And so when you say, can they get going? Absolutely. I think it's once they figure out who is the more, not efficient scorer, but more efficient leader of bringing the ball up and orchestrating the offense, initiating the offense between Rob Wright and AJ Dybantsa. Because I think some of these teams that have had a 5-star wing who wants the ball in his hands have struggled in terms of distributing to other players in the years past. Like you look at some of the Duke teams that were super talented, some of their better players weren't able to distribute. That's what made Cooper Flagg so special. So I like him to Duke because they get these 5-star wings. I think that'll be the key. If AJ is able to distribute and get the ball to other players and they shoot the prolific number of threes that they do, because that's what they're going to do once more, I think they can really peak at a high level. I just think there's a little bit of a growing pain throughout, and that makes their record hard to create the top 5 buzz.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what level of gravity AJ Dybantsa has and how that helps his teammates and how willing he is to help his teammates is going to be very interesting. So, Leaf, I want to play a game that we'll call paired preference. This is like a marketing thing, right? Like if we're trying to figure out what sort of food we want to send to market, I'm going to give you 2 in a blind taste test and say, Leaf, tell me which one of these you prefer. And that's where what I want to do to figure out where you would actually end up having BYU. So I'm just going to give you 2 teams, and you tell me which team you would prefer at like seasons at, right? Like at each team's peak, which team would you prefer? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. Louisville or BYU?
That's a tough one. I'll go Louisville, ever so slightly.
Okay, BYU or Texas Tech?
I think these are very similar teams. I would go Texas Tech because I think Christian Anderson's a National Player of the Year candidate and JT Toppin's a presumptive All-American.
Okay. BYU or Arkansas?
I'll go BYU on that one. I think
BYU. Go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead.
Arkansas has the same thing each year where they need to grow into what they are, and I think their team's a little bit redundant.
That's well said. BYU or Arizona?
Give me BYU because I think Arizona is. I love Koa Pete. I think Koa Pete might be more quickly able to do his thing than AJ is, just because the way the offense is structured. But Tommy Lloyd has rarely played through freshmen, and they have a team that I don't think is spaced very well. But I'll have to see how they develop. So I'd say BYU. I think at their peak, and their 3-point shooting is more dangerous than Arizona.
A matchup of elite freshmen in this class: BYU or Duke?
I'd go Duke because I think John Shire's really got it cooking. He's got a formula that's working.
BYU or Kentucky?
I'll go Kentucky because Kentucky has the best depth in the country.
BYU or UCLA?
I'll go BYU. I think Mick Cronin's lost a bit of juice there. I know they had a nice year in the transfer portal where they got Xavier Booker and Donovan Dent, but I think they got a lot of things to fix, and BYU's heading in the right direction.
BYU or Michigan?
I'll go BYU early. I think Michigan has a chance later because I think their defense could be really good, but I have to see that first.
Okay. BYU or UConn?
I'll go UConn. I think UConn's going to be really good this year. That roster is ready to go.
4 more teams: BYU or Florida?
At the peak, I'll go Florida. I'm a little skeptical of Florida because I don't love their backcourt, and I'm a backcourt guy.
BYU or St. John's? Speaking of backcourts, who's our point guard?
Yeah, it's a question. I'll go St. John's at their peak because I think their defense under Rick Pitino makes them very difficult to play. And last year they were a 2 seed, and I think they're a more talented team this year. So I think it's easier to go St. John's. I think BYU might start hotter than St. John's, though.
Got 2 more teams. I'm imagining you can probably guess who they are, one of whom is in their conference: BYU or Houston.
I got to go with Houston until proven otherwise.
And then finally, BYU or Purdue.
Yeah, I got to go with Purdue. That team's good, man.
Yeah.
I think their backcourt's the best in the country right now.
Yeah, man. Also, when I say Purdue, that's meant as literally no slight to the Boilermakers. I just like to have fun nicknames for teams. Okay, so Leaf, there might be other teams that you would put ahead of BYU, but in our little paired preference game right here, you put BYU ahead of Arkansas, Arizona, UCLA, and Michigan, but behind Purdue, Houston, St. John's, Florida, UConn, Kentucky, Duke, Texas Tech, and Louisville. And these are at their peaks. So at their peak, you would have BYU 10th. Out of this grouping. Does that feel about right for you?
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted. I didn't come into it thinking about who was ahead, but I think 10th is where I would have rated them. I will say St. John's and Louisville, I think they're the ones I feel the least confidence about my ranking ahead of BYU in terms of peak, because BYU should be able to really, really score. St. John's was defensively oriented, so that was, hey, if they score better and they play great defense and they were a 2 seed, that makes sense. However, Louisville, I think, is very similar to BYU. They have a star freshman, but they also have kind of some key cogs coming through the transfer portal. So there will be more of a growing period than I maybe thought of initially. So I have a little bit of reluctance there. But overall, I think 9th or 10th is where I was going to take them regardless.
Okay. Well, I love that exercise got us organically to around where you thought they would be. That I think that game is always so helpful in determining that. So a fun exercise there. Thank you for indulging me, Leaf. Now, part of determining BYU's spot, as we have already said, is going to be their record. Before they enter Big 12 play, we're going to learn a lot about these Cougars through their non-conference schedule, which they released on Tuesday. So coming up next, Leaf and I are going to look at this schedule and try to figure out if it's worthy of the AJ Dybantsa year. All that coming up here in just a second. Right after I tell you about Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head on over to the ballpark, maybe with your friends or family? It's game day. You suddenly realize, man, let's go hang out, catch 9 innings, see what happens. Well, that's where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without all the stress. And what's great is that with Gametime's lowered tickets that you can find, it allows you to splurge on other things like food, drinks, merch, or whatever it is, Gametime makes all of that possible. What I love here is that Gametime makes buying tickets for you fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes all of that worry out of buying. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, which makes it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. But we're talking BYU today. Man, as we get closer and closer to these games, you need to start looking to see if you can find some BYU tickets to get to the AJ Dybantsa show. But the closer it gets to tip-off, maybe those tickets go down as sellers get desperate. So make sure to check it out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. Okay, Leaf, now let's turn our attention to looking actually at BYU's schedule. As I said, it rolled out, their non-con did, on Tuesday of this week. As a reminder, the Big 12 teams have 13 non-con games because they bumped their Big 12 schedule back down to 18 games. And also now in this era, the NCAA is not only allowing you to play 2 high major exhibitions, but you can do it publicly and air it and sell stuff and all that, and it's great. So, Leaf, let me just very quickly run through this schedule, and then we will look at it. So 2 exhibition games, Saturday, October 18th at Nebraska, true road exhibition game. Then on Friday, October 24th, hosting North Carolina. I say hosting, it'll be at the Delta Center, along with several.
There.
Yes, I remember you telling me that. We'll talk about that. They will kick off the regular season Monday, November 3rd against Villanova in Las Vegas as part of the Hall of Fame series. Love having high-profile opening day games. Saturday, November 8th against Holy Cross. Tuesday, 11-11 against Delaware. Saturday, November 15th against UConn up in Boston as part of the Hall of Fame series. Friday, November 21st against Wisconsin back in the Delta Center. Then on Thanksgiving and the day after, they'll be down in Orlando for the ESPN Events Invitational. Matchups aren't set, but the other 3 teams are Dayton, Georgetown, and Miami, the Florida version of. Then into December, Wednesday the 3rd against Cal Baptist. That's at the Delta Center. They will then be in New York City for Jimmy V Classic on Tuesday, December 9th against Clemson, with Florida and UConn after. Man, that event should be great this year. Saturday, December, and then we close the non-con schedule with 4 bye games, hosting UC Riverside, Pacific, Abilene Christian, and Eastern Washington. So, Leaf, my first big picture question for you. Do you think this non-conference schedule is sufficient, is worthy of a top 10-ish type team, knowing they're a Big 12 team, knowing that there are 5 to 6 high major games, depending on who they play in Orlando, and 7 bye games? What are your likes and dislikes of this schedule?
Well, in terms of building confidence, I don't think they play the most rigorous schedule, in the sense of Wisconsin's a good game, but it's not the marquee splash game. And they're at home. So Wisconsin absolutely could win that game. But I think they set themselves up for success in having a good record in non-conference and a good record in D1, like high major games, and might even be 2 or 3 quad ones in there. And they probably should win those ones. However, I think that if you have AJ, you want to have the splash games. And I feel like those are lacking a little bit. I think Jimmy V's a good game, but Clemson's not the most wowing team to play, right? Like they're solid. They've made a Sweet 16 somewhat recently, and they've been a steady team. But that's not a team that I think, oh my goodness, excuse me, they made Elite 8. But it's just not a team that makes me think, oh my goodness, they're fantastic every year. And so that changes. I think North Carolina is a really good game. However, that one doesn't go on the record. And so that builds publicity, but that doesn't go on the record. And that's what matters to me in terms of making their top 5, top 10 debut. So I would say it's sufficient because I think they get a taste and they can ramp up their schedule. As they go to Big 12, they should be heading in on a hot streak and they should have confidence. And that actually really does matter to me, especially when you build out your resume come March Madness. And it's like, hey, are you a 2, 3, or a 4? Oh, our non-conference, we went 11-2. That matters. But I do think with AJ, you would have liked to have a more of a splashy game.
Yeah. I mean, I think UConn is clearly the splashiest of the games that count. As you
But I
said,
think that's going to be a loss, though.
yes, exactly. I completely agree with you. Yeah, outside of that, and that's what's interesting is the schedule. Like I love Villanova to kick off the season, but again, brand new coach and Kevin Willard. We'll figure out, that'll Caden Lewis, another big time freshman coming in. I think they'll be pretty guard heavy, like some former Jay Wright Villanova teams. But yeah, what I think for the marketing of it, right? It's win or lose a bunch of games. I think you gotta put your brand out there as you're trying to start competing at the national level. I love being in the Jimmy V Classic, but I mean, clearly the second game of Jimmy V is the big splash game, right? UConn and Florida, right? And so if this was Clemson 2 years ago with PJ Hall and the chef and all those guys, that would be a little bit splashier. But nationally, I don't think that Clemson moves the needle as much as it does for you and I, perhaps. And so, Leaf, what, like, if it was to you, I keep using your word splashier, what games might you trade out, or what teams might you want to see on here in addition to UConn?
I think what hurts them is that the ESPN Invitational isn't particularly strong. And if they had even if they were lower level high majors, these are teams that are not particularly proficient in basketball the last few years. Georgetown's been bad. Miami's been bad. Dayton's been solid, but they're not Dayton that, like, you had Obi Toppin on.
This isn't Obi era, right? Exactly.
Yeah, this isn't Dayton even a couple of years ago with Daron Holmes. Like, there was a significant drop off last year from Dayton, and their best part of the season was in the Maui. Like, maybe they're good again there, but this is not Dayton that dominated the A10 for a while. They've been middling for the last 2 years. So the Wisconsin game's good, but it's almost a must win because it's basically a home game, and they need that game. UConn, if they lose that game like I expect them to, they have to beat Villanova and Wisconsin as the two must wins. And Clemson, I wouldn't say is a must win, but it would really help for them to build the resume, because otherwise you don't have any wins that move the needle. Because let's say you lose to Villanova. I don't think they will. But let's say you lose to Villanova, you beat Wisconsin because it's home, you lose to UConn. And then you have to beat Clemson, because I don't think you can have more than 2 losses from this to feel pretty happy about what you did, because it's not like some of these competitions early in the season. You say, oh, well, we're playing 2 of the 3 teams we're going to play in an MTE or top 10 teams. And you can say, whatever, if you go 1-2 in that and you run the gambit and then you run into a really good team and you have 3 losses, you're 10-3. That's fine, but they don't have that luxury here. And I think there is pressure to have a great non-conference to lead into Big 10, because Big 12, because Big 12 has a lot of very good home teams, meaning that they're going to have a sparse level of easy wins on the road, and easy wins at home too. But BYU is a fantastic home team. But I think you need to, under the context of how easily can they be a top 10 team, their peak can absolutely be top 10. But their consistency has to be great in Big 12 play. And this leads you to believe that they should go 11-2. But if they don't, I think it makes me worry about their level to be recognized as a top 2, top 3 seed in March Madness.
Leaf, you talked in the last segment about, BYU probably needing to take some time to kind of figure each other out. And what's interesting, which is par for the course in the transfer portal era, right? Across the nation, but particularly so with this team, bringing in AJ and Rob Wright and everything. What's interesting is that the schedule is almost inverted from what I would then want to see if I were Kevin Young. 5 of the final 6 non-con games are bye games. So BYU has 7 bye games. 5 of them are the last 6. I wish we could flip that and give them more bye games early and make some of these, like, I love starting off with Villanova. That's great. It's a bang. It's a splash. That's what we always ask for, is opening day high-level games. But I wish, just the schedule worked where maybe some of the higher level matchups were into December. Now for BYU, they'd probably love it, because it's like, okay, we get 4 true home games against mid to low majors ahead of Big 12 play, where we can kind of reset after whatever's happened in non-con. I think it would, from a win-loss standpoint, set them up better if those games were later.
Yeah, I agree. I think you probably find a way to have 2 losses entering those 4-game homestands, so then you end up 11-2. So you might start 7-2 there, you end up 11-2, and that's what you want to be going in. So I get the logic. It makes you feel confident about it. But then the difference between Eastern Washington to go into Big 12 play is going to be drastic, as opposed to if you were to play Clemson as the last one. And I think it'll work out fine. I think Kevin Young's a really good coach. I loved how his team developed last year. I think the NBA experience has taught him how to make his team malleable and not play just a regimented style. And he'll be able to use Rob Wright's ability to get downhill, be able to use AJ Dybantsa's gravity. And I think that'll be really good. But I do think there's a world in which they lose to a team in Villanova. I don't think that's that good. Or will be that good, because they're not used to playing with one another. I love that they're doing the first game. It's at least a fun first game. But then you play UConn the 4th game. You play Wisconsin the 5th game. That's difficult. And I respect that, but I do wonder if you are best served to try to win all 13 of these, let's say.
Yeah.
I think you'd be better served on spacing those ones out. But I mean, that's not how these guys control their schedule. But from our perspective, it does matter from the perspective of, can this team be a 1 or a 2? And that's basically the discussion about being a top 5 team and even a top 10 team, frankly. And I think that changes the narrative about them.
And then the Orlando, the ESPN Invitational games right after Wisconsin as well. All right, Leaf, let's put some numbers to this thing. Over under 10.5 wins in non-con.
I'll go over.
Okay, good. I think I got to go there too. And just I'm not going to say 12-1 or 13-0, but give me 11-2. I think that makes sense for this team and is really good. All right, Leaf, that's enough BYU chatter. We got to switch to Memphis, Tennessee. The hits just keep on coming from Penny and the Tigers. Now the Big 12, who we just been talking about, doesn't want them. So what's next? And was this the right move by the Big 12 to say no? We'll talk about that coming up in just a second. All right, Leaf, let's wrap the show talking a little Memphis Tigers basketball. Let me introduce it this way. Have you ever seen the movie The Family Stone? It's a Christmas movie.
No, I have not.
Okay, it's a really drama-filled movie. Got lots of great actors and actresses. It's not like a happy-go-lucky, good feels movie, but it's a lot of fun. My wife and I watch it every year. Sarah Jessica Parker is one of the main characters, and there's this scene where she finds out towards the end, spoiler alert, but statute of limitations has already passed. She finds out that her fiance doesn't want to marry her, and she had accidentally slept in the same bed with her fiance's brother, who, by the way, is Luke Wilson, the night before, and he doesn't want her either. So there's this great scene where she's like bawling, wailing in the midst of this whole other family that she thought was going to be her in-laws, and she just wails and says, "Isn't there anybody that loves me?" And that's where I feel like Memphis is at right now. It's like, we can't find a spot. Nobody wants us. We can't even buy our way into the Big 12, because earlier this week, we learned that Memphis had basically given this proposal to the Big 12 to give up media rev share for 5 years. We're planning to secure somewhere between $200 and $250 million in sponsorships to share, and an exit clause, basically a probationary period where if things aren't working out, the Big 12 can remove them. Leaf, the Big 12 presidents met on Monday. They've still said no. Yahoo's Ross Dellinger reported that one Big 12 administrator said, "We vetted Memphis when we added the other 4, meaning Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and BYU, and chose not to add them then. What's changed now?" And so, Leaf, that's my question. What's changed that makes Memphis think they can get in now? And was this the right play by the Tigers to try to get into the Big 12?
From the Tigers' perspective, it makes tons of sense to me, because geographically, that's the most conducive to their success. I guess you could make an argument for the SEC, but that just doesn't seem like a fit. And so you say, well, UCF got in, Cincinnati got in. These are teams that we frankly have been better at more years than basketball and football. Obviously, Cincinnati had a big year in UCF before, but recently, neither of those teams have been particularly good. As for the basketball side, UCF was terrible, and Cincinnati was not very good this year either. And Memphis, had its highs. They beat UConn, the defending champs. They had talented teams. So I get it. I think from the Big 12's perspective, to add a team to go to 17 makes very little sense. And that's my biggest concern. I'm sure they had other ones. Buying your way into a conference does seem strange to me because they have some good funding, Memphis, especially for an American team or just a team that's not in a Power 4, Power 5. But at the same time, I don't get the buying your way in without a proposed second because none of these conferences have an odd number. And so that's my big hiccup on that when I saw it. But I don't know. I don't think that they're good enough at basketball to really have a strong case. And I don't think their football program, which is really what matters. As much as I love basketball, football's the end all be all when you're trying to negotiate. Memphis is a bit streaky.
Yeah, and obviously, this worked for SMU to buy their way into the ACC, not the AAC, which it's not. By the way, for if you haven't seen, folks, it's not the AAC anymore. The American Athletic Conference is now just the American Conference. They've even added a mascot. Leaf, did you see that? Soar the Eagle?
I did not, but I knew it was called the American.
Yeah. So they dropped athletic. It's just now American. So we'll have to get used to that. No more AAC, which is great for me because I'm always messing up AAC and ACC. Anyway, SMU buys their way into the ACC. I think Memphis was trying to run that playbook and it didn't work. Big 12 said no. And it's just another hit for Memphis in an offseason where they already lost PJ Haggerty, their All-American. Nolan Smith just left one of their assistant coaches to take the head job at Tennessee State. Sincere Parker, one of their incoming transfers, was charged with assault recently. And now this, it just feels like there's always drama happening for Memphis, Leaf, and that
always,
at some point, that's part of it for me is I, as a conference, don't know that I can trust you to be normal and not have drama. And so we don't need you bringing that to our doorstep, along with everything that you just said. And so if I'm the Big 12, I think this, for me, is the right play. And I get Memphis trying to continue to find their way into somewhere, whether it's the Big 12 or the Big East or the ACC or whatever it is. But I think your point is well made about we don't need, I think it works for the Big East to have an odd number of teams because they can play a true round robin 20 game, but it doesn't matter if you get more than that because it's not like they're going to play a true round robin with 32 conference games. That's dumb, and we're not going to do that.
But they don't have football. That's the reason it works for the Big East. If you're to add an odd number for football, I'm sure you could make it work, but it makes it far more difficult. And football is the one that generates the money in the Big 12. And even though the Big 12 this year was bad in football, frankly, they were quite bad. Utah was projected to win it. Utah was terrible. Kansas State wasn't particularly good either. And you found Arizona State, and they had this nice Cinderella-esque run. But that's not a conference that should have a Cinderella, right? That's supposed to be a contender. They don't, but that's what it was supposed to be. And they had, in the first year of the college football playoff, they would never have gotten a team in if it weren't for an automatic bid. No. And then they've performed admirably in a first-round loss in a Cinderella. That's not what you want as a conference. The one thing I will say for Memphis is Memphis absolutely has a pitch for track record of success in basketball and football to put themselves in the Big 12. And so I would have considered if I was the Big 12, just because you can never have too many teams that are decent at both of those sports. And Memphis, frankly, if you were to look on a talent scale, the last 5 years of college basketball, there's not that many that have had 5 years consecutively of more talent than Memphis. Memphis hasn't achieved at the same level, but that team with Amoni Bates and Jalen Duren was really good. They pushed Gonzaga to the brink, and they had drama. Then the next year, let's just go through a couple years quickly. Then they had a team that lost by 1 to FAU, and they probably should have won that game. That team made the Final Four. They could have made a deep run that year.
There was a bad call late. There was a missed call. Yeah.
I took them to my Elite Eight that year, even though I didn't like them, just because I thought, well, I don't think Purdue's very good. And turns out I was right that year. and then this past year, Memphis got beaten in the first round, but Memphis was a 5 seed. That's a team you should have you should want is a 5 seed in basketball, and a team in football that has won their conference numerous times in that same juncture. So I think there is an argument. I just think that their drama and their odd numberiness in this is kind of what slows them down.
Leaf, do you think Memphis eventually at some point gets their way out of the American into a better conference, or is this just a perennial thing that's going to continue to happen?
I'm sure eventually they'll find a way, because I think there's going to be a world where like a Boise State or someone moves into a bigger conference, and Memphis has more of a monetary appeal and a sports appeal than Boise State. And Boise State's good, but that's a Mountain West team versus a team that, like Memphis, if they were unbelievably desperate, could find their way into a couple conferences. Boise State geographically has a harder time doing so. I mean, frankly, the Big 12 is the best one, but like in a crazy world, could Memphis join the Big East? And it'd be basketball, but it makes no sense because they have a football program. It doesn't make sense there, but like, is there a world they could play in the ACC? It doesn't seem to make sense to me. But at the same time, Stanford's in the ACC, and that just sickens my heart to say. But and like SMU's in the ACC, there's easily ways they can find a way into something.
Yeah, because with the ACC, it with the weirdness of the Notre Dame of it all, with them not having sub conferences in football anymore or subdivisions in football anymore, like it's like I could see the ACC working, and it's like I know media areas don't, media markets aren't as big a talking point anymore, but to have the corner on the Memphis market, man, I mean that's got to be something, in the FedEx money and all that. It's just it's got. I'm with you. It's got to happen at some point. Just who and when and what's it going to look like. But for now, Memphis stays in the American Conference and should still continue to dominate, but they need to do that. We'll see how things play out for Memphis. We'll see how things play out for BYU in this year. Leaf, always great to be together, buddy. Thanks for all your great insight and wisdom here. Folks, hope you have a great Wednesday. Thanks so much for being with us. If you've not subscribed to Locked On College Basketball on video and audio, make sure you do that now. If you've not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, that link is in the show notes. We'd love to see you there. Come join us. Got a couple more shows this week. Make sure you tune in for those. But for now, apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. And until tomorrow, peace.